Hello, welcome to day 373. Last week on our review day, you had an assignment. You also had the same assignment the day before the review day and the day after the review day. You were keeping track of the self-judgments you noticed in your mind. And then last week, after 3 days of keeping track of these self-judgments, on day 368, you read NTI 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, where you learned how to ask, does this thought come from the heart? And if it doesn't, let it go. If it does, embrace it. And of course, hopefully you practiced that with this list of self-judgments. And hopefully what you discovered as you practiced that, does this come to me from the heart? Does this come to me from the heart? Hopefully you just kept getting no, no, no. And you found that the heart, which can confirm truth, did not see any of your self-judgments as truth. After that, starting on day 369, we moved into NTI 1 Timothy. And we've read all the way up to the first portion of 1 Timothy chapter 3. I want to share with you from what we've been reading in NTI 1 Timothy this week. Starting with NTI 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 3 to 7. The personhood of man, which is based on the belief in the world, is meaningless. It is meaningless because the world itself is not real. So all that is based on the world is also not real. This is a very deep thought that you do well to sit back and soak in fully. For within this thought is another symbol that is key to your own salvation. Feel within your heart, right? We're back to asking the heart what's true. Feel within your heart as I speak, and you will hear the truth of all I say. So what is this deep thought that we set back and soak in? That the world is not real. So what does that mean? Does it mean that the world is to be ignored? Does it mean that we don't need to look both ways before we cross the street? Of course not. Because the world is experienced, and that's not being denied here. But what this is saying is the world is not what it appears to be. There is something here that is more real than the experience of the world. It says, this is a very deep thought that you do well to sit back and soak in fully. For within this thought is another symbol. So what is that other symbol? It's the symbol of consciousness. You know, once upon a time, I shared with you the 4 principles of God. Let me go ahead and open up the 4 principles of God and share that with you again. I think it might be helpful here. This is the 4 principles of God that I shared with you once before. The 4th principle of God is the manifestation of the world. This is also sometimes called dream or illusion, because as we just read in NTI 1 Timothy, it's not real, meaning there is something here, but it's not what we think it is. It's not as it appears to be. A part of this 4th principle of God is the person. Of course, the world, the universe, thought, emotion, images, even the afterlife and the paranormal. But the person and the world are a part of this fourth principle of God, which is often called dream or illusion. And notice that's exactly what NTI 1 Timothy is saying. The personhood of man, and man here is like human. The personhood of human, which is based on the belief in the world, is meaningless. It's meaningless because the world is not real. So all that is based on the world is also not real. That this fourth principle of God is not real, is a very deep thought that you do well to sit back and soak in fully. For within this thought is another symbol. Within this thought is another symbol. Now, we've already learned about the third principle of God. We learned about the third principle of God in NTI Ephesians. It's the creative process. It was called the law of love in NTI Ephesians. It can also sometimes be called the law of mind. And basically, the idea is that whatever we give our attention to becomes manifest in the world in some way. Above the third principle of God is the second principle of God. This is the subject awareness, the I am principle. It's also often called consciousness. And what we're going to be looking at in NTI 1 Timothy is focusing on the fact that this is more at the core of what we really are than the person. Now, the reason the second principle of God or consciousness is being called a symbol is because it's not yet the absolute. Even when we realize ourselves as consciousness, we still have a little bit of a ways to go before we know our absolute truth, which is the first principle of God, pure, unmanifest life intelligence. But to see ourselves as the second principle of God is more correct or more real than to see ourselves as a person in a world, which is the fourth principle of God. So let me go back to the reading now that I've shared that. So again, this idea that the person and the world are meaningless because they're not real is a very deep thought that we do well to sit back and soak in fully. Because within this thought, there's another symbol that's key to our own salvation. And that other symbol is consciousness, or the second principle of God. Feel within your heart as I speak, and you will hear the truth of all I say. I'm going to skip over to verses 8 to 11. We're going to talk about the individual personhood that is in the fourth principle of God. Individual personhood is like a measuring stick with many points of measurement along its shaft. It allows for differences and differences within differences, so that it is fully supportive of the judgment that maintains illusion. So when we see ourselves as people, fat and thin, smart and dumb, sophisticated and unsophisticated, different religions, different races, different cultures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those who drink alcoholic beverages, those who do not drink alcoholic beverages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these differences provide lots of opportunities for judgment. And of course, the ego is the judgment. So personhood keeps the judgment alive. And as we focus on that judgment, remember NTI Romans chapter 2 said that judgment was the building block of illusion. As we focus on that judgment, we keep painting or creating the fourth principle of God, which is the illusion or the veil, or the world as it appears, but not as it really is. So the concept of personhood is the concept that permits self-judgment. It also permits rejection, which means it's the denial of all that is, which means it is the belief in separation. The concept of person is the belief in separation. The concept of person, the idea that I am a person, is the primary obstacle to knowing the truth of what I am and the truth of what all that is. I'm moving on to verses 15 to 17. Here is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. There are no differences. There is only the illusion of differences, and the illusion is accepted into your own heart by your belief in individual and separate personhood. There are no differences because all that is consciousness. That's what the world is. It's consciousness, made by consciousness and as consciousness. And to see it as anything other than consciousness is to believe in an illusion. So if we want to realize truth, one of the things we need to be willing to let go of is the belief that I am a person. And that's what NTI 1 Timothy is really all about. I'm going to NTI 1 Timothy chapter 2, starting with verse 8. Rest within the light of all that is, and accept this light as yourself. That light is consciousness. So this is saying rest within consciousness and accept consciousness as yourself. If I'm accepting consciousness as myself, then I'm not accepting that I'm a person, because I can't be both the fourth principle of God and the second principle of God at the same time. It's either or. And this is what the loving consciousness meditation, which we've just started, is all about. It's resting within the light of all that is and loving that light, accepting that light as ourself. That's what the loving consciousness meditation is all about. Verses 9 to 10 says, rest within the acceptance that the temporal being you seem to be is not the totality of your beingness. And so it cannot be the truth of who you are. It is like a fragment or a thought within a universe of thought, and yet it is only one thought within a thought of God's. It is a speck of color on a tapestry of oneness, and so it is a part, but you are the whole. So if I share my screen again and come back to the four principles of God, what this is pointing to right now is us as the second principle. Again, still a symbol because our ultimate truth is here. But first we awaken to ourselves as the second principle. I am the second principle of God, paying attention to the world as if I am in the world when I'm not. But that divine attention that I give to the world is the creative process that keeps making the world and the idea that I'm a person in a world. But the person is just a thought within the mind of the creative principle, which comes from the awareness of consciousness focused outward on the world instead of being focused on itself. Again, the person is just a thought within the creative mind of consciousness, which comes from the awareness or the attention of consciousness being focused outward on the world and the person as if that's what I am, instead of being focused on myself, consciousness, as what I am. And when you look at this, you can see why the loving consciousness method of meditation is a correction. Instead of focusing on the world, instead of focusing on thought, which is about the person and about the world, we focus on consciousness, on awareness, on the I am sense. So we're focusing on the second principle of God instead of what we usually do, which is being focused on the fourth principle of God. The story of personhood is the story of imagination within a mind that is one. Because it is thought, it need not be rejected. So this is important. The person that you perceive yourself to be does not need to be rejected because it's not real. It can be accepted exactly as it is. In fact, to reject it would be to judge it, and all judgment is of the ego. So it can be accepted. This says all thought may be embraced and loved as one. It's loved as thought or as a creation, a temporary creation of consciousness. But the thought is a speck and should not be seen as the whole. It should not be seen as what I am. For a fragment by itself is nothing. But a speck of color within the tapestry of everything is a part of the everything of which it flows. So I can love this creation, enjoy the experience of this creation. I just don't want to see this as what I am. This is a temporary expression. I am consciousness. NTI 1 Timothy chapter 3. The overseer of all things within the world is the one eye that sees all things as they are in truth. This one overseer is within you, so that you need not subject yourself to another in order to see. You must only subject yourself unto yourself. Here is what I mean by that. Realize that the thinking mind, which analyzes and separates and makes judgments and rejects, is a mechanical machine that is not you. And isn't that interesting? We saw a Leo video some time ago that referred to the ego as a machine. And of course, you've heard me refer to it as a robot. It is mechanical because it is a habit. And it is a machine because it was made through the creative process. But it is not you, because you are the maker of that which is made, right? You're the consciousness, the second principle of God. Behind the mind that you think is you, meaning the person's thoughts, behind the analyzing and belief and drama and action, there is one who observes the you that is in play. And this is very important because this is what we're beginning to tune into now. Instead of seeing ourselves as the body and as the thoughts, we want to become aware that we're the consciousness or the awareness that's aware of the body or aware of the thoughts. Like in the loving consciousness meditation, we're sometimes asked to focus on the seer, right? And again, if I go back to the four principles of God, you'll notice that the second principle is subject awareness. It's that which sees, that which is aware. So we want to become aware that rather than being the thought, being the emotions, being the body, we're that within which witnesses the thoughts, witnesses the emotions, and witnesses this body. And of course, we've been practicing that with NTI Philippians and NTI Colossians as we watch the body without judging it. And this, of course, is what the mindfulness is all about. Behind the mind that you think is you, behind the analyzing and belief and drama and action, there is one who observes the you that is in play. And that you, of course, is in quotation marks. This one can watch the drama and have thoughts about it, even as the drama seems to be in full play. This one, you know, is more at the core of who you are. Again, it's not all the way to what we are because we're the first principle of God. When we begin to see ourselves as the second principle of God, instead of seeing ourselves as a person in a world, we are moving in the right direction. This one, you know, is more at the core of who you are. But if you are the observer, if you are the subject awareness, can you also be the one that is caught up in the drama? Can you also be the person? And so when we practice the loving consciousness meditation, this is a part of what we really want to do. We want to notice that I am the observer of thoughts. I am the observer of emotions. I am the observer of sensations. I am the awareness that's aware of what is heard. And then place our attention as much as possible with that observer or that observing, that watcher or that watching, that seer or that seeing. And we really practice this a lot with the open eye meditation. So this is now just practicing the same thing we practice with the open eye meditation, except our eyes are closed. And of course, the instructions that come during the loving conscious audios are there to help us. So loving consciousness is going to be our primary form of meditation now. When we started NTI First Timothy, we had an exercise where we were asked to contemplate, and we talked a little bit about this already in this video, to contemplate the world is not what it appears to be, it's consciousness. I am not what I appear to be, I am consciousness. And then we were asked to contemplate this question, what is consciousness? Because of course, if we're going to practice the loving consciousness method of meditation, we need to know what consciousness is. What is it that I'm placing my attention with? What is it that I'm loving? You could say there are three types of consciousness, at least the way consciousness is typically defined. One type of consciousness is perceptual consciousness. And perceptual consciousness is being aware of the world. It's outward looking. But you'll notice when you listen to the instructions in the loving consciousness meditation that you're asked to ignore the world and ignore thought, which means we're not focused on perceptual consciousness. We're not focused on being aware of a world. We're not focused on being aware of thought. That's not the type of consciousness we're looking at. Another type of consciousness is called autobiographical consciousness. This arises once we learn language, and it's thought stories about I and other. Obviously, since we're asked to ignore thought, we're not focusing on autobiographical consciousness. We're not focusing on the me in mind. The other type of consciousness is called self-consciousness. This is being aware of oneself, including being aware of awareness. Being aware that I am aware. That's the type of consciousness we're loving. We're loving the awareness itself. We're loving just that awareness is. We're loving just that I am aware, without loving the perceptions, without loving the thoughts, just the awareness. That's what we're focusing on with the loving consciousness method. Now, we'll be practicing the loving consciousness method of meditation 6 days a week. On the review days, you have a different meditation instruction. On the review days, including today, your instruction is to meditate in silence for as long as you want to meditate. It says you may practice any method of meditation that you want to practice. So I thought one thing I would do today is review some of the methods of meditation that we've practiced in the 500 days. We've really gone from the simple to the more complex, loving consciousness being the most complex, although it can also be simple meditation that we've learned so far. We started with brain relaxation meditation. And remember, the brain relaxation meditation is just sitting and relaxing the brain. You might pay attention to the sensations in the brain. It's kind of a spa type feeling. You just allow the brain to relax. The second type of meditation that we learned was the appreciating life meditation. And that's where you just sit and pay attention to the life in the body. Again, you may notice lots of sensations in the body. Sometimes when you really pay attention, it feels like there's an entire universe within this body, or maybe even universes. From the head to the toe, you just pay attention to the aliveness in the body and appreciate it. The next type of meditation that we learned was the desire for truth meditation. And that's where you focus more on your heart. Maybe focus on your spiritual aspiration. Focus on how much you want to realize truth or awakening or enlightenment or know thyself or realize consciousness or be only love. You just focus on this desire and appreciate it. The next type of meditation that we learned was the do nothing meditation. And that's exactly what it says. You just sit and you be and you do nothing. We learned it with eyes open, but you could also do it with eyes closed. The only real trick here is not to get engrossed in thought. You allow the thoughts, but without getting engrossed in them. You're staying aware that you're meditating, staying aware that you are doing nothing and letting everything else be as it is. The next type of meditation was focus on being. It's very similar to the do nothing meditation, except that we do shift our attention a little bit into noticing that I am. Noticing that I exist. I is. You just focus on being. The next type of attention was being aware. This kind of combines all of the meditations that we've done up to this point. And you just be aware of the life in the body. Be aware of the sounds. You just be aware of thoughts. You just be the presence of awareness by allowing everything else to be as it is. The next type of meditation that we practiced was the open eye meditation. And this is, of course, where you look at a thing, but you don't examine that thing. You pay attention to the awareness that's looking through the eyes, right? And then the next type of meditation that we practiced really was either the stage 1, 2, or 3 meditation. from the Leo video, How to Meditate Deeper. And if you want to, you could go on YouTube and search for actualized.org, How to Meditate Deeper, watch that video again, and maybe pick a different stage to try. So on review days, you're going to have the option now of meditating in silence with any of these forms of meditation that you want to practice. This coming week, you're going to be continuing with NTI 1 Timothy. And on the weekend, your special assignment is going to be listening to a teaching from NTI 1 Timothy chapters 3 and 4. Of course, we're continuing with the loving consciousness meditation. We'll be doing that for some time. And at the very end of the week, you'll begin reading NTI 2 Timothy. NTI 2 Timothy teaches us to allow emotions rather than repressing them. All right. So that's all I have to share with you today. So I will see you next week. Have a good week with NTI 1 Timothy and the Loving Consciousness meditation. Bye.